Imagine warriors so terrifying, so seemingly impervious to pain, that their enemies believed they were supernatural inhuman beasts. These were the Berserkers, but what truly fueled their legendary, unstoppable rage? Was it a mystical trance, powerful hallucinogens, or something far more chillingly human? When the sagas describe men who bit into their shields, walked through fire, and feared nothing, are they describing magic, or a weaponized dissociative state? We need to understand how a human mind can be intentionally broken down and rebuilt to turn off the instinct for self-preservation. Welcome back to Anatomy of Dread. Today, we are deconstructing the ultimate Viking shock troops. We will move past the pop culture image of the shouting barbarian to investigate the chemical and psychological cocktail that created the Berserkergang, the battle frenzy. We will expose the terrifying reality of men who channeled the spirits of bears and wolves to become the most effective terror weapons of the Viking Age. To understand the Berserker, you must first shed the modern mindset and enter the animistic reality of the Viking Age. The very word tells us their nature. Berserker means bear shirt. These warriors, along with their brethren, the LFHNR or wolfcoats, were not mere soldiers. They were members of elite totemic warrior cults, deeply devoted to Odin. Odin is often portrayed today as a wise grandfather figure, but historically, he was terrifying. He was the lord of the hanged, the god of madness, war, and ecstatic frenzy. The Berserkers were his acolytes, practitioners of a dark spirituality dedicated to channeling his fury. From a psychological perspective, this was a weaponized form of shapeshifting known in Old Norse as hamrama. They didn't literally turn into animals, but they mentally adopted the persona of an apex predator before battle. They sought to shed their human inhibitions, their fear of death, and their moral compass, replacing them with the singular, remorseless killing instinct of a bear or a wolf. The sagas tell us these men were often social outcasts in peacetime, too volatile, too dangerous to live among normal people. They were kept separate, like caged beasts, unleashed only when the Jarl or King needed a shock troop to break the enemy line through sheer terrifying brutality. They were living weapons, respected, but profoundly feared by their own kin. How does a man turn off his deepest evolutionary instinct, the fear of death? The most enduring and controversial theory is that the Berserkers didn't just pray to Odin for madness, they drank it. Historical speculation centers on the Amanita Muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, but if they used this, it was not a psychedelic trip in the modern sense. This mushroom contains muscimal and ebotanic acid neurotoxins that act as profound deliriants. From a psychological and physiological perspective, ingesting this isn't pleasant. It causes nausea, sweating, muscle twitching, and confusion. But crucial for warfare, it can induce macropsia condition where objects appear much larger or smaller than they are and a profound sense of dissociation from reality. If the Berserkers utilized this, they were essentially entering battle while in a state of weaponized delirium. The drug didn't give them super strength, it severed the connection between the mind's perception of pain and the body's reaction to it. In this chemically altered state, a sword wound might feel like a distant pinprick. The enemy shield wall might look like tiny toys to be smashed. They weren't brave in the traditional sense. They were chemically absent, trapped in a waking nightmare where the consequences of violence no longer applied to them. They became terrifying because they were fighting in a reality that only existed in their poisoned minds. While the mushroom theory is compelling, the sagas point to a more reliable method of inducing frenzy, extreme psychological conditioning. The Berserkergang was not a random fit. It was a triggered state of weaponized dissociation. Snorri Sturluson, writing in the 13th century, gives us the definitive description. His men went without mailcoats and were as mad as dogs or wolves, bit into their shields, and were as strong as bears or bulls. From a psychological perspective, the act of biting the shield is a crucial detail. It wasn't just for show, it was a ritualistic physical trigger used to ramp up their own physiological arousal. By grinding their teeth against iron, growling, and shivering, they were manually hijacking their own autonomic nervous system. They were forcing their bodies into a supreme state of fight or flight before the first blow was struck. They flooded their systems with adrenaline and cortisol, dilating their pupils, increasing their heart rate, and narrowing their focus to a single, obsessive point, the enemy in front of them. This was a form of self-hypnosis. Through years of conditioning within their cults, they learned to use these physical rituals to snap their minds into the beast state. They weren't out of control. They were under perfect, terrifying control of a singular, violent purpose. When the battle began, the Berserkers were unleashed like war dogs. Their tactical purpose was simple: shock. In an era where warfare was defined by rigid shield walls and disciplined shoving matches, the Berserker was an agent of chaos designed to shatter enemy morale. From a psychological perspective, facing a berserker was terrifying not just because of their strength, but because they violated the rules of human behavior. When you stab a man, he is supposed to fall, scream, or retreat. The berserker did none of those things. Thanks to their dissociative state induced by drugs, adrenaline, or both, they ignored wounds that would cripple a normal soldier. The sagas claimed they were immune to iron and fire. In reality, they just didn't care that they were dying. A disciplined soldier confronting a laughing, howling madman who keeps fighting while bleeding out experiences profound psychological horror. The enemy line didn't just break physically, it broke mentally in the face of such unnatural fury. But the human body is not designed to run on maximum adrenaline forever. The Berserkergang was a burst of unsustainable energy. The sagas record that after the frenzy passed, the warriors were left in a state of profound physical exhaustion, sometimes weak and bedridden for days. It was a massive physiological crash, the inevitable debt paid for borrowing the strength of a god. They were unstoppable for an hour, and useless for a week. So, we conclude our psychological autopsy of the berserker. Were they powered by magic mushrooms, profound self-hypnosis, or the spirit of Odin? The answer is likely a terrifying combination of all three, but the specific trigger matters less than the psychological reality of the state itself. The Berserkergang was a form of weaponized dissociation. The true dread of the berserker is not that they were superhuman monsters. The dread lies in the fact that they were human beings who had discovered a way to systematically strip away the architecture of the civilized mind. They voluntarily shut down empathy, reason, and self-preservation, the very things that make us human, to access a primal reptilian state of pure violence. There were men who sacrificed their own sanity on the altar of war to become living weapons. The legacy of the berserker is a dark reminder that the capacity for monstrous, unstoppable rage doesn't come from a god or a drug. It is already dormant inside us, waiting for the right ritual to unlock it. And now, the final judgment is passed to you. After reviewing the evidence, do you believe the legendary rage of the berserkers was fueled by the chemical delirium of the Amanita mushroom? Or was it the result of extreme psychological conditioning to trigger a trance state? Leave your analysis in the comments below. Let's continue the discussion on the darkest realities of the Viking Age.